Excellencies and distinguished speakers, on behalf of the Cosmos Foundation, I welcome you to today's Ambassadors Lecture Series on Bangladesh-Nepal relations, Prognosis for the Future. I will now run through the program itinerary for today's event, which will be recorded and broadcast at a later date on our media partners' channels, United News of Bangladesh, details of which will be shared with all of you. Today, we will commence with welcome remarks by Mr. Masood Jamil Khan, Vice President of Cosmos Foundation, who will then hand it over to our Chair, Ambassador Tariq Karim, former Bangladesh High Commissioner to India and Ambassador to the United States, Honorary Emeritus Advisor to Cosmos Foundation, to deliver his remarks. The keynote address will be delivered by His Excellency, Mr. Ghanshyam Bhandari, the Ambassador of Nepal to Bangladesh, followed by our distinguished discussants who will each speak for a duration of 10 minutes. Mr. Sabir Ahmed Chowdhury, former Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Hari Sharma, former Principal Secretary to the Honorable Prime Minister of the Republic of Nepal, which we believe will be online, Ms. Lailafar Yasmin, Professor, Department of International Relations, Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Dhaka, Mr. Parvez Karim Abbasi, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, East West University. Thank you, and we very much look forward to the discussions today. I will now hand it over to Mr. Masood Khan to commence our session.
Ambassador Ghanshyam Bhandari, distinguished panelists, dear friends. On behalf of Cosmos Foundation, may I say what an enormous pleasure it is for us to hold our first discussion on Bangladesh-Nepal relations on this platform. Cosmos has always sought to expand mutual understanding between Bangladesh and other friendly nations, regionally and globally. It had been our wish for quite some time to hold such an event, but COVID precluded it. However, with much of the impact of COVID behind us, and the characteristic enthusiasm of His Excellency Ghanshyam Bhandari supporting us, we have been finally able to organize this long-awaited seminar. He is an eminent career diplomat with great experience of, among others, multilateral institutions in Geneva and New York. Our fervent thanks also go to you, Mr. Ambassador, for consenting to deliver the keynote address today. The majestic scenic beauty of this Himalayan country is matched by the warmth of friendship of its people for their fraternal Bangladeshi nation. We are closest neighbors, separated only by a few kilometers of land known as the Chicken Neck. Our diplomatic relations go back 5 decades, as Nepal was one of the earliest countries, 7th if I remember right, to recognize Bangladesh. Bangladesh and Nepal were founding members of SAARC, and indeed the SAARC headquarters are located in Kathmandu. Both are also members of 2 other sub-regional organizations, BIMSTEC and BBIN. All kinds of institutional frameworks link us together. Despite all these features and characteristics, our trade and commerce have been minimal, and the optimizations of possibilities still far away. In the earlier years, in 1976 to be precise, we had signed 4 agreements covering trade, transportation, civil aviation, and technical cooperation. Soon thereafter, we set up at the high level of finance ministers a joint economic commission. Closer to our present times, in 2017, we inaugurated the Kakar-Bhitta Bangla Bandhu transit route, allowing for Nepal's use the facilities of the Mongla port. Despite all these endeavors, our mutual trade did not exceed a total of roughly USD 60 million both ways, with the balance heavily tilted in Bangladesh's favor. Nepal's key exports to Bangladesh are lentils, oil, cardamom, wheat, vegetable seeds, handicrafts, pashmina, and other agricultural products, whereas industrial raw materials, medicine, chemicals, textiles, and clothing, jute products, and electrical and electronic goods make up the majority of Nepal's imports from Bangladesh. So much work remains to be done in this regard, including the adoption of some trade facilitation measures. People-to-people links have grown though. There are approximately 6,000 Nepali students in Bangladesh, and the sights, sounds, and scent of the Himalayas are a constant attraction for Bangladeshi tourists. Between our two countries, one of the most promising sectors is energy. This will also grow as Nepal develops its hydropower capabilities and Bangladesh optimizes its gas output. There is a secretary-level joint steering committee for energy cooperation, which held a significant session in August 2022. However, trade in energy and electric power will need to be trilateral, as India's consent and participation would perhaps be essential and critical. South Asian diplomacy will require the putting some emphasis upon that aspect. I have no doubt that our deliberations today would include these topics and more. I am also pleased that to chair and moderate to these discussions we have Ambassador Tariq Karim, former Bangladesh High Commissioner to India, and the Ambassador to the United States, Honorary Emeritus Advisor, Cosmos Foundation.
Despite the fact that Nepal was among the first 7 countries to recognize us, as it actually recognized us on 16 January 72, our relations have not really gone at the pace that kept up with our expectations on both the sides. And this was naturally, I think, a factor in our geolocations as we are. Masood, in your very kind welcome remarks, you've also mentioned about how power trade has been hostage to India's cooperation in allowing transit. And very early on, I remember when I was Director General or Additional Foreign Secretary at that time for South Asia, I had mentioned that this is a 3-way traffic. If they were at that time opponents of what we call transit for India, I had said, well, we are hostage to transit also because we cannot evacuate power from either Bhutan or Nepal or Northeast India, last of all, if India does not allow us transit. So all these words are basically, they cut both ways, and we have to understand that if we want something, we have to give something. If we deny something, we will also be denied something. That is how nation states of the 20th and 21st century will operate. This is the law of the Westphalia concept of statehood. We were not a Westphalian configured entity, geographical entity. We were a civilizational, historical entity which knew each other in a different manner. We had no concept of states, we had no concept of hard borders, we had no concept of borders that could not be permeated. And suddenly we find an iron curtain descending which says you cannot go and meet your neighbors, you cannot go and trade with your neighbors, you cannot pass. I remember in the early days in 50s when electricity used to come from West Bengal to cover up for the shortages in what was then East Pakistan. Okay. That stopped. So everything stopped. Now Nepal and Bangladesh are, I think, finally about to enter a new phase. And that is, it happens after the recent prime ministerial level meeting between Mr. Modi and Mr. Dhakal about 2 weeks ago, where they declared at the highest level that the grid line that will be used by Nepal to transfer electricity to India will also be used for transfer electricity from Nepal to Bangladesh and possibly later on from Bhutan to Bangladesh. In that lies a huge, very exciting possibility for us. And that is that we can begin the transition more quickly to green energy. Not just clean energy, green energy, because it will be energy derived from hydropower. And this region, Bhutan, Nepal, and Northeast India, have over 100 gigawatts of hydropower lying untapped. So if 40 megawatts starts coming, that is just the beginning, but it will open a floodgate. Just as 250 megawatts power coming from Barampur to Beramara opened up a floodgate. I will not steal the thunder at all because there are many more things that he's going to cover, but I wanted to get this off the ground because I think if there is one factor which will determine the future of Bangladesh-Nepal relations, it is for the two of us to cooperate in the energy sector. I think this will be the transformation that this part of the South Asian subcontinent, the BBIN part, is going to be waking up soon. So may I invite Ambassador Bhandari. He has a distinguished career. He was Director General or Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and before that he was in New York as the Deputy to take the floor and deliver his address.
I thank the Cosmos Foundation for hosting this episode of Ambassador's Lecture Series on Nepal-Bangladesh relations and inviting me to speak on the theme for the future of our relationship. I thank the Vice President of the Foundation, Mr. Masood Khan, Chair, Ambassador Tariq Karim, and all those in the panel for agreeing to join us to deliberate on our journey of friendship and cooperation. Given your knowledge and expertise in Nepal-Bangladesh relations, sub-regional and regional areas, as well as global issues, I cannot think of a better panel of speakers for this session. In my remarks, I'll briefly highlight the current state of Nepal-Bangladesh relations and will shed light on 5-6 major issues that I find critical for our bilateral partnership in the future. When I say this though, I'm conscious of the statement that the only people who see the whole picture are the ones who step out of the frame. So I'm afraid, speaking from the official frame that I am in, I may not be able to do justice to the topic. But as all of us have our own ways of cutting the cake, I will try to present to you the slices of my choice. Excellencies and dear friends, the roots of Nepal-Bangladesh relations can be traced in times predating 1972, the year we established formal diplomatic relationship. Even before Bangladesh's liberation war, and even before Nepal's recognition of Bangladesh as an independent country, our societies and communities were connected through profound linkages. Hence, our relationship is characterized by these historical and cultural connections. This has been evident, including in the centuries-old movements of peoples and goods between our societies, in the finding of the palm leaf manuscript of the Charzapad in the Royal Court of Nepal, and in Sanskrit being the root of both Nepali and Bangla languages. And the list goes on. We speak similar languages, eat similar foods, and have similar traditions and customs. Our relationship is also characterized by an idea of good neighborliness. I always say our relationship is a problem-free, trouble-free relationship, which is based on trust, cooperation, and mutual respect. We have stood by each other in times of our needs, including during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our relationship is also characterized by a shared vision of development and partnership. This vision constitutes long-standing development aspirations of our peoples for well-being and prosperity. There has been a steady growth in the economic and commercial ties between our two countries. Strong links at the political, institutional, business, and cultural levels continue to foster mutual respect and understanding. Bangladesh is one of the preferred destinations for Nepali students to pursue higher education, especially in the medical field. Currently, about 3,000 Nepali students are studying at different Bangladeshi universities across the country. Likewise, Nepal remains a popular destination for Bangladeshi travelers. We were talking about tourism connections before this program began. Over 25,000 Bangladeshi friends visit Nepal every year, and the number was even higher in the pre-pandemic level. Nepal and Bangladesh collaborate also at regional, sub-regional, and multilateral forums such as BBIN, SAARC, BIMSTEC, United Nations, Non-Aligned Movement, and Group of 77 in China. I do not want to give you further details of where and how we collaborate, because the theme of today's lecture is about the prognosis for the future. So, Excellencies, with just about 51 years on the clock of our formal diplomatic relationship, we can of course take stock of, celebrate, and commemorate the achievements we've made together. But as we look to the next 50 years and beyond, there is a need to build on the progress and consolidate our partnership with a more focus on enhancing economic linkages. First, on trade and investment. The bilateral trade, as Masood mentioned the facts, between our two countries is increasing but remains at the modest level. It was around 100 million, over 100 million in 2021, but now it is around 70 to 80 million US dollar. The figures show that the trade is heavily skewed in favor of Bangladesh. Nepal primarily exports agricultural, especially red lentils and agricultural and other plants and plant parts. And Bangladesh exports oil cakes, electrical and electronic items, jute and textile, and pharmaceuticals. As you can see, Nepal's export basket is quite narrow. And as a landlocked developing country, our transport cost is higher. And it takes a longer time to send and receive merchandise from overseas markets. On top of that, unlike Bangladesh, and I think Ambassador Tariq Karim would very much agree with me, Nepal's case is slightly different because Bangladesh was an original WTO member, and Nepal had to negotiate WTO accession by agreeing to lower the tariffs and almost eliminate other duties and charges. All these realities erode Nepal's competitive edge, and they are in play when it comes to our trade and investment negotiations. The government of Bangladesh decided in December 2022 to lift a 2-decade-long ban on Nepali yarns entering Bangladesh via Banglaband border. We thank the government of Bangladesh for this initiative. The private sectors, led by our premier chambers, FNCCI of Nepal and FBCCI of Bangladesh, are closely connected. Nepali and Bangladeshi investors have also collaborated to invest in some joint venture projects. The signing of DTA, Double Tax Avoidance Agreement, in 2019 has opened avenues for further collaboration. But given the closeness and proximity between our two countries, what we have achieved is nowhere close to the potential. There's a need to further intensify our efforts to enhance trade and investment linkages, including by eliminating or reducing the other duties and charges that are levied on our goods and items. We must address the non-tariff barriers, including through upgrading the facilities at land custom stations and standardizing the procedures. Secondly, and this is very much close to most of our hearts, Nepal's hydropower potential, and I thank Ambassador Tariq Karim for highlighting this earlier on. Nepal's hydropower potential and Bangladesh's energy needs is a much talked about subject. This has been on the table of our negotiation for many years. Currently, Nepal has an energy surplus. But what we are producing now is just about 5% of what is economically viable. This means, if fully realized, you can imagine Nepal's hydropower has the potential to cater to the needs of clean energy solutions of whole of South Asia. Our concrete efforts to materialize bilateral energy cooperation with Bangladesh began with the signing of an MOU on power cooperation in 2018. Since then, we've made some tangible progress. In fact, to tell you the truth, we have never been more hopeful than this year in terms of realizing power cooperation between our two countries. Our two governments have agreed to start power trade at the earliest, even with a small volume of 40 to 50 megawatt to begin with. We know power trade between our two countries cannot take place, as Ambassador mentioned it, without India's cooperation and collaboration. It was not least because of this that the issue also featured quite prominently during Honorable Prime Minister Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina's visit to India in September 2022 and Right Honorable Prime Minister Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda's visit to India some weeks ago. We are encouraged by the decision of the Government of India to facilitate the first trilateral power transaction from Nepal to Bangladesh through the Indian grid with an export of up to 40 megawatt. I know, and all of you would agree with me, that this is just a baby step and a symbolic one. But this will be a huge milestone to kickstart a new drive for our bilateral and, in fact, the sub-regional cooperation in energy sector. In addition, talks are also underway for the joint investment of 683 megawatt hydroelectricity project, which is Sunkosi 3rd, that's the name of the project, in Nepal. I understand Bangladeshi authorities are also engaged with GMR Company of India in finalizing the deal for 500 megawatt of electricity from Upper Karnali, which is another project of Nepal. And I take this opportunity to mention that Cosmos Foundation is closely involved in this, in the negotiations towards reaching the conclusion of the deal. These details aside, the importance of energy cooperation is immense, be it to better utilize our waters and meet the energy needs, or to ensure transition to clean energy solutions for our two countries, Nepal and Bangladesh. There is a Chinese proverb: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. This resonates so well when we talk about energy cooperation between our two countries and among the countries in South Asia region. Once realized, it will be a much needed springboard to take our bilateral relation as well as the sub-regional cooperation into the next level. In the third area, whether we talk about energy trade or any other aspect of economic engagements for that matter, nothing substantive can be achieved without connectivity. Connectivity both in physical and digital sphere and through land, air and water is the beating heart of bilateral, regional and sub-regional cooperation. Currently, two airlines, Biman Bangladesh and Himalaya Airlines, are operating 10 direct flights a week between Kathmandu and Dhaka. The movement of goods and people between our two countries is mostly done through two land ports, Banglaband and Burimari. We thank the government of Bangladesh for the offer to use port facilities at Mongla and Chittagong for Nepal's trade with the third countries. And I have to acknowledge and thank the government of Bangladesh and the political leadership for the generous gestures whenever we are in need. Over the years, we have received this sort of response from the government of Bangladesh, and I want to acknowledge and express our gratitude for that. Talking about sub-regional connectivity, the negotiations on the movement of cargo and passenger vehicle agreement under BBIN framework are underway. Successful conclusion of these negotiations by addressing each other's concerns, and these concerns may have to do with the level of infrastructure development that we are in. If there are any concerns of that nature, conclusion of the negotiations will be a significant milestone towards achieving seamless road connectivity in the sub-region. We all know it's a bitter reality that our region is one of the least integrated one. We started some ambitious initiatives under BIMSTEC and SAARC, but we have a long way to go in ensuring a really integrated South Asia, and the integration between South Asia and Southeast Asia also is at the same level. In this connection, digital connectivity is one of the emerging frontiers. IT sector is flourishing both in Nepal and Bangladesh. According to a new recent study by IIDS, one of the leading think tanks of Nepal, Nepal's earnings from IT sector and export-oriented IT sector in Nepal last year, in 2022, were more than the earnings from tourism industry. We all know Nepal is a tourist-friendly country. We talk about tourism industry so much, but this is one area which remains unexplored. And now people are trying to explore the potential. So, promoting collaboration and enhancing digital connectivity between our two countries also would be a new frontier for us to work on. Having said all this, as two major proponents of SAARC process and ardent advocates of the overall regional cooperation, Nepal and Bangladesh need to work together to revive and advance the agenda of connectivity and regionalism. I know Ambassador Tariq Karim will smile when I say the solutions to our problems are largely available in South Asia and BIMSTEC region. This is exactly his argument, I know. It is upon us to work together, revive the stalled regional process, and find solutions through solidarity. And the fourth area that I want to highlight is, of course, tourism and people-to-people linkages. This has been a strong connecting thread between our two countries. Our two countries offer unique and diverse touristic potential, be it in terms of Nepal's majestic mountains, verdant valleys, beautiful waterfalls, and historical and archaeological sites, or Bangladesh's fertile plains, exquisite sea beaches, captivating mangrove forest, and cultural and historical monuments. We must build linkages between the Himalayas and the Bay of Bengal, between hills and plains, and between markets and mines. I know there have been efforts under SAARC, BIMSTEC, and BBIN to establish tourism circuits connecting religious and archaeological sites. But much remains to be done to connect these sites and promote ecotourism, adventure destinations, and establish those tourism circuits. We must promote innovation, ignite entrepreneurship, and build stronger bonds between the peoples and business communities. The fifth area is climate change. Both Nepal and Bangladesh are at the front line of climate crisis. We often talk about, when we refer to the relationship between Nepal and Bangladesh, we never forget to talk about the organic, the natural link between Himalayas, the water towers, we define them as water towers, and the Bay of Bengal, the water reservoir. These perennial rivers flowing between the Himalayas and the Bay of Bengal also serve as a heat sink in the summer and sustain lives and livelihoods downstream. The Bay of Bengal, on the other hand, remains at the center of hydrological cycles. The weather pattern in the Bay of Bengal has direct bearing on the mountains, stretching across the Hindu Kush Himalayas. However, the climate crisis has disrupted this natural link. Sea levels are rising and the mountains are losing their snow covers. A report published by ICIMOD, to which both Nepal and Bangladesh are members, and this report was released just the day before yesterday, on 20th of June 2023. That report suggests that the glaciers disappeared 65% faster in 2010s, that means last decade, than in the previous decade. On current trajectories, glaciers in the Hindu Kush Himalayas could lose up to 80% of their current volume, and snow cover is projected to fall up by up to a quarter, that's 25%. This has even endangered the lives and livelihoods of 240 million people living in the mountainous regions and about 1.65 billion people living downstream. In this context, we must prioritize climate action and build climate resilient pathways in line with the pledges of Nepal and Bangladesh to reduce carbon emissions and in line with the global target of reaching net zero scenario by 2050. We must continue to champion the cause of climate agenda at the global stage, just like we did around loss and damage package that was agreed at Sharm el-Sheikh in the last COP. We need to continue raising voice, including for climate finance, share our experiences and best practices, and work together for protecting our peoples and conserving the ecosystems. Finally, I personally think that our cooperation at multilateral level is a less talked about subject. Just like two schoolmates of development, we are both, Nepal and Bangladesh are both set to graduate from the LDC category by 2026. Of course, our graduation is an important development milestone for both of us. But going forward, our countries are set to meet a number of challenges, including through the loss of international support measures. It will be more so for Nepal, as our case is the first one and a unique case of graduation without meeting the per capita income threshold. But we must work together and push against this pushback so that we can ensure a smooth, sustainable, and irreversible graduation, as they say. Sharing of experiences, including during the current preparatory period, will be critical. As there was the reference of my previous stint in New York, I remember how our two delegations, Nepal and Bangladesh delegations, worked closely in New York to ensure a 5-year preparatory period. I think you know it very well. Generally, according to the UN standard practice, they give a 3-year preparatory period to prepare for graduation. But this time, it has been an exceptional one that we have ensured 5-year preparatory period according to operative paragraph 3 of the resolution, which recommended the graduation of Nepal and Bangladesh. And not only that, there is a paragraph in the resolution which we call a safeguard clause, which is in the 5th paragraph, that says that in case that 5-year period is not sufficient for Nepal, Bangladesh, and Laos PDR, there is a chance that it is reviewed in the next triennial review in 2024. But we are not talking about extending the preparatory period. We must take up this graduation issue with the development partners and international community to ensure that favorable measures are available for the graduating countries, even in the transitional period after 2026. Our two countries share a common commitment beside developmental issues, share a common commitment to the values of global peace and security. Currently, Nepal and Bangladesh are the first two countries. Bangladesh is number 1 and Nepal is the second leading country when it comes to our contributions to UN peacekeeping operations. Bangladesh and Nepal continue to contribute to this noble cause of peace and security for last so many years. Our two countries also work quite closely around the broader development agenda, SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, LDC matters, South-South cooperation, climate change, digital divide, and many more. we are almost on the same pace. What is interesting is that whenever it comes to these global issues, whether they are related to development, climate change, or any other, we are most of the time on the same pace. The need is to further consolidate this cooperation. As Toni Morrison, one of the wonderful Black American novelists, says, definitions belong to the definers, not to the defined. So rather than being the defined, it's necessary for Nepal and Bangladesh to work together and define their priorities themselves. Excellencies and dear friends, both of our countries have made important development strides in political and socio-economic areas over the years. With a stable government under the dynamic leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh has made phenomenal economic progress in the last 14 years. Well, Nepal has a unique story to tell when it comes to the stability of the government. But we are now a vibrant and dynamic democracy. We have made some remarkable socio-political gains, settlement of political issues, resolution of peace process, institutionalization of inclusive democracy, progress in human rights, women empowerment, and human and social development, and this list goes on. All these developments open up new avenues for our bilateral partnership. What is needed is that we need to tap on our collective strengths for the mutual benefit of our two peoples and countries. For this, we must make mutually beneficial relationship our common language and cooperation our common pursuit. The right way to go may be to target the early harvest, as they say, and to work on longer term goals. We can scope in education, health, climate change, and connectivity, including the opportunities that digitalization offers. This can then lead to an enhanced level of economic cooperation. We must promote economic linkages and make them the centerpiece of our bilateral relations. I know this is quite an ambitious to-do list, and the previous two speakers who spoke before me, Ambassador Tariq Karim and my friend Masood Khan, also referred to some of the potential areas of our bilateral cooperation. This is because we are so close. And the closer the people are, the closer the societies and communities are, the higher the expectations can be. And this is a big challenge for us to work together. But please allow me to conclude with a quote from a great Bengali poet, Jivanananda Das. In fact, this is one of the first poetic lines I learned upon my arrival in Dhaka some 11 months ago. And the line is, I can't read the whole poem, but I think this is just a line. Jadi thake bandur man, jadi thake bandur man, gang par haite katu khan. If you have, for those of you who are listening to us virtually, if you have a friend's hand, crossing a river won't take much time and it won't be difficult. I would like to once again thank you.
Nepal is close to Bangladesh not only geographically, but the hearts of our two people are very close to each other. So that is possibly the reason why that we know each other very well. We know the extent of our relationship as well as the challenges that we encounter. So today I'll very briefly try to cover the extent of our relationship, and which will be followed by a few suggestions. Ladies and gentlemen, the political relationship between Bangladesh and Nepal is excellent. Nepal recognized Bangladesh on the 16th of January 1972, being the 7th country to recognize Bangladesh. The diplomatic ties were established on the 8th of April 1972. I'd like to pay tribute to the leadership and the people of Nepal who assisted Bangladesh both in extending spiritual support as well as logistical support to the people of Bangladesh during their liberation struggle. Bangladesh has recognized 11 Nepali personalities with the distinctive honor of Friends of Bangladesh. The foreign policy of Bangladesh is based on the dictum of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, which is friendship to all, malice to none. Moreover, Bangabandhu was the proponent of developing Bangladesh together with the South Asian neighborhood. Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is carrying forward the legacy of Bangabandhu and strengthening cooperation with the neighbors. Respected audience, there has been numerous exchange of visits between Bangladesh and Nepal, including the visit to Dhaka by President Vidya Devi Bhandari in 2021, when Bangladesh was celebrating Mujib Chirantan, the golden jubilee of the independence of Bangladesh and the birth centenary of the father of the nation. The relationship between the two countries dates back to the 11th century, when the great scholar Otish Dipankar traveled from Bikrampur, which is now in Bangladesh, to Nepal on his way to Tibet to preach the teachings of Lord Buddha. The oldest script of Bangla, known as the Charyapad, was discovered in Nepal and now preserved in the archives of Kathmandu. There are commonalities in language, dress, and social custom of the two countries. The traditional cap worn by the Nepali people is known as Dhaka Tupi. Ladies and gentlemen, the educational cooperation between Bangladesh and Nepal is fairly commendable. A good number of students from Nepal are pursuing their studies in Bangladesh in both the public and private institutions in undergraduate and postgraduate levels. The cultural cooperation between the two countries is also extensive and vibrant. There are regular exchanges of cultural troops between the two countries. Bangla Academy and Nepal Academy have signed MOU on cooperation to preserve and promote our languages. The Shilpokala Academy of Bangladesh and the Nepal Academy of Fine Arts also signed an MOU. The two think tanks, namely the Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies, that is BIS, and the Nepal Council of World Affairs signed an MOU and are in close cooperation with each other. The defense cooperation between the two countries is also significant, where regular exchanges of delegations are taking place and exchange of trainees from the National Defense College and Staff College are occurring regularly. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Nepal has been facing the challenge of its being a land-blocked country. This challenge has been addressed to some extent through the cooperation among Bangladesh, India, and Nepal using Banglabandhu, Fulbari, Pani Tanki, and Kakavita corridor. Such connectivity also exists through two rail interchanges with Birol, Radhikapur, and Rohanpur, Shingabad. Apart from air connectivity between Dhaka and Kathmandu, discussions are going on to set such connectivity between Saidpur and Bhadrapur. Bangladesh is a gateway from the Himalayas to the Bay of Bengal, and it has offered Nepal the use of the ports of Mongla, Chattogram, Paira, and also Matarbari when it will be commissioned. In order to realize connectivity more extensively for water resources management, connectivity of power, transport, and infrastructure, the sub-regional initiative called the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, abbreviated as BBIN, was introduced though the progress is not commendable. Ladies and gentlemen, both Bangladesh and Nepal are enriched in tourist attractions, and the people of the two countries are visiting each other's countries regularly. Motivation and appropriate publicity can increase the number of the tourists. The two countries support each other during adversities. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the two countries assisted each other by sharing pharmaceutical products, vaccines, and medical equipments. Though the political relationship between Bangladesh and Nepal is good, the extent of trade relation is not satisfactory. In 2021, the total trade volume between Bangladesh and Nepal was about $60 million, with Bangladesh exporting around $50 million, which is obviously much in favor of Bangladesh. This amount is negligible with respect to the total export or import of either of the two countries. There were numerous attempts to increase this figure by negotiating on tariff or non-tariff barriers and discussions on preferential trade agreement and free trade agreement, but unfortunately the outcome was not satisfactory. We need to work extensively on this important issue. Ladies and gentlemen, Bangladesh and Nepal pursue pacific foreign policy of maintaining good relationship with all the countries. Both the countries are members of the Non-Aligned Movement and G77 in China, and thus looking forward to achieving peace, progress, and prosperity through collective efforts without being included into any strategic alliance. The two countries are cooperating with each other in the regional fora like SAARC, BIMSTEC, and BBIN. Both the countries chaired the least developed countries group for a long time. Bangladesh and Nepal rank among the first few countries to contribute the highest number of armed and police forces in the United Nations peacekeeping missions. Bangladesh and Nepal are also abundant in manpower and are also exporting in different parts of the world. Both the countries are members of the Colombo process, and collaboration in this field can be mutually beneficial.
I come from very political background, although I served with the late Prime Minister G.P. Koirala and the former President Rambaran Yadav, who had a kind of deep engagement with the Bangladesh, starting with the liberation movement. As a young activist and coming from political family, I grew up watching the Bangabandhu's photos and his famous pictures in the newspapers and Nepali magazines. I'm highly fascinated by the journey that Bangladesh has taken, and together we have been partner in many areas of political development and economic development and cooperations. Talking of a bilateral relationship, we, as many speakers before me have highlighted, that we have been connected by history. We are connected by huge landmass of South Asia. We connected by rivers. We connected by ecosystem. And most importantly, we connected by monsoons and rivers that flows through Himalayas down to the sea. But what is important is that we are very much connected, but we have territorially disconnected. The short strip of India that lies between us is very important, and we need to recognize the fact. Our bilateral relations, yes, there are possibilities. We have been engaging with each other, trade, investments, name it. But I think of recently the kind of development in South Asia, the regional cooperation, which was imagined from Bangladesh in the 80s, got the shape of South Asian regional cooperation. Is suddenly a stalled process, and I think in South Asia, this formal regional process has stalled for quite some time. That's the worry trend for all of us. Nepal and Bangladesh were together in the journey for this regional cooperations. But nonetheless, there are other sub-regional frameworks available to us. These sub-regional frameworks presents us with the great opportunities and challenges, and I think we need to explore and be more innovative in those exploring those areas. Most importantly, what I see is that there is a very much good relationship in terms of state-to-state relationship, people-to-people. We hear the previous speakers talking about Nepali students in Bangladesh, in medical studies and various other fisheries and other studies, which is a very good. But what I see is to take this relation forward. I think in the 80s, when Bangladesh Institute of Strategic Studies and other think tanks were collaborating with the Nepali think tanks to develop a kind of synergy of understanding possibilities and exploring the areas of engagement further. I think what I find is there is a very much little interaction these days among the various knowledge producing centers. IIDS is a particular interest in Nepal, plus their universities and private initiatives. I think creating a sound social science foundation of engaging each other and understanding each other is important. Why I'm saying this particularly, raising this particular issue is because we need to, as things keep on changing, we have witnessed the history unfolding in the region together. Nepal's independence, autonomy, and integrity, Bangladesh autonomy, independence, integrity. We have respected each other. But in the days ahead, as Ambassador Bandari was mentioning, in areas of climate crisis, in areas of investments, other things, we need to understand each other much better in terms of various dialogues like this. And I think as we grow in our own respective arenas, as an independent and strong countries and societies, we need to understand each other's sensitivities also, because the friends need to speak, friend needs to discuss various issues. So what I'm posing here is that we need to have a regular strategic dialogue. By strategy, I'm not limiting on a kind of survival and other kind of issues, but how to take relationship further. Is there any mechanism and way we find through these kind of dialogues in think tanks or semi-government or a track two? Track two is always seen when there's a problem, but in a regular times also we need to understand each other. And then again, I heard participants talking about the possibilities of trilateralism, because both of us share borders with India. Both of us share historical ties with India. India being in the central country in the South Asia, even in the sub-region. How do you bring in India into table in terms of various conversation, not only a transit, trade, but other developments and then other issues? I would be rather very frank with you. As nation grows stronger and become much more visible, powerful, we all have a sensitivities, and we need to, Bangladesh is becoming very strong in our region in terms of economic development, thanks to hard work of people of Bangladesh and the able leadership of Bangladeshi government, but you also develop your own sensitivities.
So when we are talking about trade and other issues, we know that one issue has not yet been mentioned officially here is the chicken thing. So when we are talking about transit with Nepal, we know that from 1997, Nepal has been using the Mogla and Chittagong port, and from 2020 onward, a number of other trade and transit sort of cooperative frameworks have been signed between Nepal and Bangladesh. But the issue is that we need to be a little bit realistic. This is not transit, but this is transshipment. So this is something we need to point out, that there is a huge barrier in the case of us connecting with two our landlocked neighbors, Nepal and Bhutan, that we are only doing transshipment, and where Bangladeshi trucks or Nepalese trucks are not allowed to cross the chicken lake. This is something our Honorable Prime Minister raised in her talk with his counterpart in India last year, and we need to talk about more. The efforts must come from both Nepalese side and Bangladeshi side, so that we can talk with our big neighbor, because South Asia's least integration in the areas of economy and trade is also because of its unique geographic division, that the largest neighbor, which shares its border with almost all the countries except for Afghanistan in South Asia, both land border and maritime border. So this actually has its advantage as well as its disadvantage. That actually takes us to the area of great game. So the phrase great game was coined by Rudyard Kipling back in the colonial period. So often we have been talking about that the great game has come to South Asia. We often like to sort of promote ourselves by saying the great game has come to Bangladesh, but not only Bangladesh, as Nepal is aware, being landlocked, that it has now a lot of strategic choices, not to depend only in our biggest neighbor. And we know that 2 times that blockade that was placed on Nepal, it was in 1990, and it was in 2015 after the wave of earthquake when Nepal needed the most assistance from international community, it could not get so. So we need to remember that countries of South Asia now are with wider choices, more choices than they had before. So this great game and coming of great powers in South Asia, not only to Bangladesh but also to Nepal, it means something. Remember, World Bank and other Western financial institutions were not providing aid for infrastructure building for a long period of time. In South Asia, it has started to do so with Nepal first, and now they are offering these infrastructure related loans to other South Asian countries as well. Why this is happening in this manner is because the strategic importance of these countries are on the rise. We do not call ourselves as small countries, not due to geographic location or geographic size, but because of the strategic potentials that we hold, we are very well on the way of calling ourselves as rising middle powers. And in Bangladesh's journey, Bangladesh needs more friends as Nepal needs, and I believe that is an area that we need to cultivate. Now, people contact. A lot of things have already been said, but one interesting area that from my other researchers have found out that Nepalese students do come to Bangladesh, and they come to study medicine, engineering, law, and relevant sort of subjects. But one interesting area we often did not recognize or did not pay more emphasis to is that Nepalese students are not only Dhaka bound. So they study also in universities outside of Dhaka. For example, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Science and Technology University in Nepal. I met with Nepalese students. We had this is before COVID in 2019. We had our iftar together, which is ceremonial for them. Of course, there were 10 male students and 1 female student studying there. So they have more propensity to go outside of Dhaka and to see Bangladesh, learn from Bangladesh from different manner. But there's another issue. We had a Japan-Bangladesh talk, and when we found out that from South Asia, most number of students going to Japan would be from Nepal. So why Bangladeshi, Indian, Pakistani students are not going to Japan, but the Nepalese students are going there? This is one area we may cultivate, we may do joint study, and then we can also apply it in the case of Bangladesh. Perhaps I'm thinking I'll take 2-3 more minutes. Another area that is also very less talked is the defense relations between Bangladesh and Nepal. So we know in even peacekeeping area, Bangladesh is the topper, Nepal is second. So we need to also understand and pay attention that South Asian countries, more or less, we do not have comparative advantage over each other on many products. We generally, whatever we are doing, we generally, because of many constraints or many similarities, we do excel in similar kind of areas. Even peacekeeping operations is another area. Remember in 2018 when Shantigur took place in Bangladesh, we found very capable Nepalese brigadier generals and others coming here as SMEs, subject matter experts. I was there because I participated in a voluntary basis because I do work on the peacekeeping area as well. So it was excellent for us to learn from the Nepalese subject matter experts because they have a terrain that close to African terrains where both Bangladesh and Nepal go. So even peacekeeping operations is of course another area where we can work on and we can collaborate. So here we can see from it was from 2005 that Nepal has started sending a defense attaché to Bangladesh. So military cooperation in the defense area and especially in the areas of if I may mention a few which I'm not expert because of being an academic of course. So high voltage force, para basic force, officers basic force, jungle warfare and counter-terrorism course, these are a few in the areas that Nepal and Bangladesh collaborate, and we have a lot to learn from each other. Ours is a plain terrain, yours is a sort of elevated terrain, so we can learn a lot, and together we can create a strength, because in human peacekeeping operations you can see a growing trend of involving more local and regional participants. So we might already lose our aid in this area, so we need to innovatively think that it is not, if Bangladesh loses, it's not only Bangladesh's loss, but it's also a loss for South Asia, and gradually first Bangladesh and then it will be the other countries. So we can collaborate in this area, and we can sort of come up with some ideas so that we can jointly provide a sort of a game changer in the area of human peacekeeping.
So if you look at the literature on Nepal-Bangladesh trade, yes, we have signed a double avoidance tax treaty, but we have said that yes, we need to eliminate tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. But why have we not been managed to eliminate this? This is just a question. Because see, if you look at the literature for the last 20 years, private sector operators from both sides have said that we should eliminate tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers, will benefit. And they've eliminated the number of items that we have seen. But export growth from Nepal to Bangladesh or Bangladesh to Nepal has been pitiful. We know only a few of the success stories. Pran, for the example, for that matter again, the other agro-process industries, Happy Furniture, Walton coming in, but this is just a few. And now let's come to the actual issue. What's the big elephant in the room? It's of course not me. But the idea is that again, our power connectivity, our trade and transit with Nepal or Bhutan remains or is contingent on the goodwill of India. Bottom line, it's good to acknowledge the truth. Because over here even, we have a TAPI like power agreement over here, where basically India is a facilitator between these three countries over here power agreements. And quite rightly, as has pointed out, that the guidelines have observed that any power generated from Chinese power plants cannot come to Bangladesh or cannot be used in the regional grid. That is written. So yes, how do we secure our energy potential? Because we need to export, or in our grand strategy, 10,000 megawatts of power from Nepal in the next few years. For this, we have to put our money where our interests are, and we will invest in Nepal. We will invest in hydroelectric potential. To do this, what is the thing that we need to do? And these are the concrete suggestions that we would like to basically do. First is immediately try to secure number one, Bangladesh bilateral investment promotion and protection agreement, because this is going to basically protect our investment assets in Nepal and Nepal's investment in Bangladesh, and this is going to facilitate greater investment flows both from Bangladesh and Nepal. Number one. Number two, we have talked about tourism. Yes, on average, 25,000 to 29,000 Bangladeshi tourists go to Nepal every year. Less than 3,000 Nepali tourists come to Nepal, from Nepal to Bangladesh. But over there also, the devil is in the details. What are the areas? The greatest number of tourists from Bangladesh go by air. Number two, land travel is an interesting option, and it could be a viable option for university students or the young backpackers. But again, air travel becomes expensive, so land travel is a preferred route. But geographically, our preferred site would have been eastern Nepal, but the tourist sites are in western Nepal. And over there also, the problems with geography come in. And let me give you a very simple example. To go to Nepal by land route, you need a dual entry transit visa. And often, securing a dual entry transit visa from Nepal, from India, especially in COVID times and even normal times, is difficult. So what happens? Land tourism normally does not take off. Even over here, I'm not blaming India, but I just say these are the facts. India has a role to play. to facilitate tourism, land tourism between Nepal and Bangladesh. Number two, look at the geography of this, and this is the part where I will pay the indulgence. Now, for us, the closest way via land tourism is to the Bangladesh port. You go from Bangladesh port on to Fulbaria and then all the way to basically get Kakrabaria, if I believe correctly. Kakragita. So from Fulbaria to Kakragita, it's 37 kilometers distance. But the Indians don't issue visa from the Fulbaria port. Why? Their interest is more from giving visas, land visas, from Chandrabandha port, which is 110 kilometers. So instead of 37 kilometers distance, it becomes 110 kilometers distance. So 2 hours 45 minutes travel time increases. So again, this in itself is a major impediment. So how do we do so? So we must have cross-border tourism facilitation where India is also a relevant stakeholder. As Ambassador Tariq said, as the Honorable Memories Ambassador said, without India, because of the geographical requirements, we cannot make progress. We can just accept the fact and move on. Unfortunate, but that is how it is. Apart from this, what does Nepal stand to gain if we invest in tourism goes over here? Less visited sites like Viratnagar, Dhankuta, and again other places, those will receive greater attention. But for that, Eastern Nepal, the tourism infrastructure needs to develop. Because over here from Kakragita to Kathmandu, it takes around 18 hours, 24 hours to reach over there. So again, if you want to invest over there, Bangladeshis and Nepalis can go for joint venture agreements who are building up again better roads, better hotels, and this can be replaced for ecotourism also. Apart from this, that's the tourism part that we are doing here. Now, another thing that we have missed out, I think this is missed out, because in recent times, the Bangladeshi cinema, just like Nepalese cinema, we don't do well. Why? Because we have a very thriving Bollywood and nowadays Southern India or basically again Tollywood industry over here. So this is the curse of living in the big neighborhood because the cinema industries don't flourish. But what happens over here that in recent times, our drama serials or OTT packages, now they are going to have bigger budgets because they have a lot of following. Nepal could be a favorite tourist destination site, just like Seychelles is, just like Maldives is. Because then if you have budget facilitation over here, so where basically for 7 days or 10 days you can negotiate a budget, why do you need to go to Switzerland to shoot scenes for a movie? Again, Nepal would do perfect that, maybe Nepal would do even better. Indian movies in the 80s used to go, and I remember Amitabh Bachchan's movie running around in Kathmandu. And again, this is the first view we had of Kathmandu before we went there. So, again, the problem is, because of our proximity to India, often lethargy sets in, and we often blame India for everything. That's the truth. But how much of it is due to our own inertia, lack of imagination? What about accreditation of private universities and public universities from Nepal and Bangladesh?